Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Spy-oT. My name is Turk. I pronounce they, she. I am at the University of Cambridge in the Cambridge Cybercrime Centre, and I will be talking to you today about domestic abuse. This is a domestic abuse talk. If you are not comfortable with that, please feel free to leave or tune out or put headphones on or otherwise disengage from this talk at any time. Your mental health is way more important than 10 minutes of me rambling, so please just look after yourselves. Cool? So, I'm going to be talking about tech-facilitated IoT abuse. So this is the use of any IoT device for abusive purposes, and we've done a lot of research on this already. We know that there's a very wide range of devices which are misused for domestic abuse, from things like Amazon Echo and Google Nests as smart speakers, security systems like CCTV, Ring doorbells, and front door locks, smart appliances, so your smart toasters and ovens and whatever else you can slap the word smart on, and other home automation tools. We know all of these are being used for abuse, and we have a good understanding of how these devices are abused, thanks to wonderful work by people presented at USENIX here a couple of years ago, as well as at other conferences. And I'm going to take the chance to shamelessly self-promote and talk about something else that we did, which is another way of looking at the summary of how these devices can be used for abuse. So we define the human harms model as an alternative to STRIDE, CIA, and etc., including harassment, access infiltration, restrictions, manipulation, tampering, and surveillance as a way of categorizing the different forms of abuse and misuse that you might see in a system that are not so technical but are involving things like domestic abuse, online trolls, doxing, and so on. We'll be using this a little bit, but for now, when we're looking at modeling domestic abuse, we're interested in a couple of things. One of them is understanding the model attacks and threat vectors and how people can attack a system and perform abusive actions through them, such as using the abusive vectors paper by Stephenson et al. Or our own harms threat modeling system. When it comes to how we treat the adversary themselves, we've had this idea of a UI-bound adversary from Fried et al. For a little while now, almost a decade. Which is the idea that we can constrain the abuser threat model to just be UI-based attacks. It's not technical things that someone's coming in, hacking a system, they're not hacking your phone, or coming up with these really technical, complex attacks. We don't need to worry about that in this scenario. What we're interested in is the user interface. Now, the thing that this misses out, and this has been missed in all prior research, is how are people actually learning to use devices abusively? And that's what we're interested in this study. So, we did an in-person exploratory study, which we call an abusability study, wherein we provide all participants with a range of different IoT devices. We selected some from security, Ring doorbell, and baby monitor, some kind of home hub or smart speakers, some household appliances, smart lights, and a smart door lock, because I had one left over from my master's thesis, frankly. But also as another kind of access-based IoT device that gives us a more useful sample. We had stands around a room with researchers associated to each of them. And the idea of the study was, here are a bunch of IoT devices. Here's the rough idea of what tech abuse looks like. Go ahead and figure things out. Talk aloud as you do it. We're going to record how you do this. Please sign the consent forms and so on. We went through a full ethics approval from Cambridge. And we managed to get 25 participants across two-hour events to take part in the study. We classify the different attacks that people came up with according to harms, mostly, and these examples are all intentionally silly because this talk is otherwise going to get way too depressing. So, in terms of harassment, we have lots of different ways of messaging people. So I can talk through an Amazon Alexa using my phone as a way of talking to someone inside the household and saying harmful things to them. I can also go the other way and talk to an in-home device and have that send messages to their personal device, to their personal phone. I can also interact with the environment. So I can do things like, hey, smart assistant, please set an alarm at 3 a.m. that plays Baby Shark at full volume and it can't be turned off for at least an hour. It sounds a bit silly, but it can wake you up at night, it disturbs your sleep, it becomes really infuriating, and I can just routinely mess with someone's life and make it harder for them to just exist as they wish. There are also issues with access and infiltration, so people can, who are granted access to one device, such as a smart speaker, can then share that access with other people who may not be intended to have access. So I can share it with a friend who wants to also understand what's going on and help me in my spying efforts. Or I can try and force access, so I can threaten the person who owns the device to get access, or I can use access to one device to try and get into others. So smart homes are often quite interconnected. If I have access to one thing, I can then pivot from that to other devices in the household. In terms of restriction, there is a continuing problem in the access control hierarchies that we use in IoT devices, where the person who sets it up tends to have a lot more control than anyone else in the home. So if we look at the Ring doorbell example, the admin user panel for a Ring doorbell has an awful lot of settings, loads of things you can do. And if I am the guest user, aka anyone else in the system, I can do basically nothing. So if I'm the person who buys this device and or sets it up, I get a lot of control over what anyone else in the household is able to do. I can control what you're able to interact with. I can control which devices you have access to, and I can just rip all of this access away from you if I so feel like it. A couple of people in our study also said you could go to the extent of destroying the devices with a hammer, which is maybe an extreme example, but it would stop you from using it. In terms of manipulation, there's lots of gaslighting that is possible through IoT devices. So if I have access to something which is connected to your calendar, then I can take your important job interview at a certain date, time, and location, and I can change it to be a meeting with Satan the day after in the Wrath Ring of Hell, which is not very helpful, and I'm going to wonder how it got there, but it means I'm going to miss my important job interview. And now I have a way of messing with people's lives through IoT devices, even though this shouldn't really be possible. It's also not just the calendar invites, there's also logs. If I want to perform actions in the house and blame them on another user, like turning up the thermostat and telling them they're wasting power, then I can do that, go through the logs and hide that I've changed this and say, hey, you must have been the one who's done this. How dare you waste all this power? We're short on money this month. And finally, we have surveillance. So there are the obvious things. Anything with a camera or a microphone can be used to spy on someone with video or audio. Nice and straightforward, but also there's the logs and history which tell you what everyone else has been up to. So I can ask if some duck goes or how you would spell hippopotamus, but I could also see your shopping history, I can see who you've been talking to, and I can see what's going on in your life and use this to spy on you. There are also a bunch of attacks which we call miscellaneous technical things which don't really fit into the harms framework. These mostly come from our kind of security-focused group, the Cybersecurity Society, who were recruited to take part in this. And they came up with a lot of interesting ideas, only one of which was actually performed in either of the studies, and that was NFC cloning of the smart lock tags, because they're MyFair Classic. It's been broken for a decade now. That's not a problem. Everything else people came up with didn't really work, and there are quite a few reasons for those. But it was interesting they came up with them anyway. Now, I did say we're looking at how people learn to do abuse, so let's actually talk about that before I run out of time. So the majority of people in our study were interacting with the user interface of the applications they were given. So you had a phone connected to each of the devices, so you could mess around with the apps. Almost as many people were looking at the physical hardware itself, poking at the different buttons, seeing what they're able to do. And a handful of people were coming up with these interesting ideas and then seeing afterwards if they could enact those on the device that they had. This is all well and good, but the majority of people are using the functionality that's provided by a device. So, key takeaways, most of the technical attacks that people come up with are not achievable, which fits with the UI-bound adversary that we've been using for a while. But also, the possible misuses were discovered not by having some pre-existing goal of this is the abuse I want to carry out, but instead, I'm interacting with the device that I have available and seeing what I'm able to do. So in this way, the provided functionality is enabling abuse. So we provide more detail on this in the paper, but we have this idea of a functionality-enabled adversary, not just UI-bound. UI-bound is great in that it says we don't need to look at the complex technical attacks, and we can instead focus down towards the user interface as our base for interventions. But for functionality-enabled, what we're saying is, well, these features that you're providing are causing harm, whether you want them to or not, whether you have good intentions or not. So what we need to focus on is not just looking at user interface interventions generally, but looking at how many different possible misuses and abuses there are of everything you have incorporated in your system. We do use harms for this as a recommendation, but we do need to test it in things. Feel free to use your own methodology, but we need to look at kind of focusing on the abusability of a system, not just the normal usability of it. So lots of different abuses that people can figure out quite quickly in 2 hours. And we know that they're mostly figuring out by exploring devices. There is, as always, more information in the paper. And as mentioned by Corey, I am on the job market from September 15th onwards. If you have some project on interpersonal harms, please let me know. I'm interested. Thank you for listening.